Hello and welcome to the Tank Club. This is episode 1 of our new World Tank Academy, which is aimed to give you all the information you need to succeed at PvE tanking in the new World MMO. Today's topic is going to be the most basic of topics. It's Taunt and Threat. This is the core basic of tanking in any MMO game. And with New World, you have both Taunt and Threat as a way of aggroing enemies. The absolute first thing that you're going to need is a weapon that has a gem slot. It doesn't matter if the gem slot is filled or not filled. You then need a carnelian gem, and you need to cut that at the stone cutting station to turn it into a cut gem, and then you drag it onto your weapon to give you a weapon with a slotted gem. Once you have this, you are now able to generate some base levels of threat, and you are now able to gain aggro of enemies with light attacks, heavy attacks, and weapon abilities. So there are a wide range of different taunts in the game. We've got the sword and shield, and we have shield bash, and we have defender's resolve. With the warhammer, we have shockwave. With the great axe, we have reap. Hatchet has berserk. The greatsword has roaring rupture. Rapier has riposte. With the spear, you can use vault kick. And finally, with the blunderbuss, you've got claw shot. So the sword and shield has 2 taunt skills, making it very useful for maintaining aggro. Other very good tank weapons include the warhammer, great axe, hatchet, and greatsword. Aside from those, the other weapons generally wouldn't be used for tanking, even though they have the possibility to taunt. They don't offer as much utility with those weapon types. Now, you cannot rely on taunt skills to maintain aggro of enemies. This is because, at best, you would have 3 taunt skills, but they have reasonably long cooldowns. And there are sometimes situations where enemies are spread out, and your taunt simply won't reach anything. Taunt sets your threat a fixed percentage above the current highest threat holder. So if you use a taunt to initiate a fight, your initial threat will be rather low, meaning you could lose taunt once the taunt timer runs out. So there's a taunt icon in the game that you can see above enemies. It's a taunt debuff icon. It's like 3 lightning bolts, and it looks like this. This is the icon that appears above enemies' health bars when an enemy has a physical taunt applied to it. The only downside to following this icon is that you can see any debuffs applied to an enemy, whether you applied it or someone else applied it. So you might see this icon even when someone else has taunted an enemy. Okay, next we've got threat. Now, you can maintain aggro of enemies even without taunting. You just need to make sure you've got that gem on your weapon, just by making sure you generate the most threat. So methods of generating threat include, like we mentioned already, slotting a carnelian gem into a weapon. This increases your base threat when you attack the enemy, and it does vary depending on the gem quality. Healing also generates threat, and you generate threat from healing equal to the amount of health that is healed by the spell used. So as you'll see quite often is when enemies start to run off if you don't have a high enough threat level. This is because the healer has healed you and other group members for too much, and this has impacted how high of a threat that the healer is causing on the enemy. By doing damage, you can also create threat. Threat is generated by causing damage, and the more damage you do, the more threat that is generated. Using the hated gear perk, it's not usually needed when using a pristine carnelian gem, but you may find this helpful if you are a newer tank. Now, carnelian gems offer varied levels of threat depending on the quality of the gem that you use. You want to be using that pristine gem because it gives you 300% more threat, but there are varying levels of threat created by different gem qualities. When using a pristine cut carnelian gem, you should be able to maintain aggro of enemies without needing to use the hated trait on your gear. You just need to make sure you're doing light attacks, heavy attacks, you're using skills, you're using your taunt abilities, you're doing everything. That will be enough in most cases. So, to signify whether an enemy is aggro to you without the taunt skills, so you've got an enemy that is not aggro to you, looks kind of like this. So as you can see around the health bar, when you look at the enemy, they have a grey outline around the health bar. You do not have them taunted or aggroed. So you either need to cause aggro by a taunt skill, or you need to generate more threat on this particular enemy. Enemies that are aggroed to you look like this. So when the health bar has the red outline, such as this one, this is the indication that you have the enemy aggroed onto you. You'll get this when you taunt an enemy with a taunt skill or when you've generated the most threat. So both of these things will show a red outline around the enemy. 3 light attacks with your sword will generate enough threat on the enemy in most cases without even using a taunt skill. If you go into combat with light and heavy attacks and abilities and then cast your taunt skill, you'll have a really high threat level. That is how it works. So you should instigate combat by attacking the enemy with abilities or light attacks or heavy attacks to generate threat, then cast your taunt skill. It's also a good idea to be the first person into combat, as enemies will usually target you if you are the first person within range of them. It's also nice if the healer doesn't place a heal down before it's needed, so the healer should kind of wait a few seconds at the start of combat for the tank to go in first, the tank to cause some damage, cause some aggro, cause some threat, use that taunt skill, then the healing goes down on the ground. If the healer places healing down as like the first thing into combat, all the enemies will immediately run for the healer. When you have aggro of an enemy, the nameplate will have the bright red highlight around it. Enemies also have a visible debuff on their health bar, as we've mentioned. Each enemy has its own threat table, which means you need to make sure you're generating enough threat on everything. Even the enemies that might be stood outside of a stack or outside of where the group is stood, they might be attacking your group members. You need to try and generate threat on those as well. Maintain threat and taunt by casting your taunt skills, but making sure to spread them out. Don't cast them all back to back. You've got to spread them out a little bit. Do some other abilities, do some light and heavy attacks in between the taunt skills, space them out a little bit so that you're not wasting all the cooldowns at the same time, because you don't want to be in a situation where you have no available taunt. Make sure you are light attacking enemies with your sword, especially because you'll have the refreshing perk ideally on that sword, and that'll reduce your cooldowns. When you're using a warhammer, heavy attacking is a really good idea. That will reduce your cooldowns if you took the correct perks, because that's how that works as well. So you're able to reduce your cooldowns by doing that. So that is everything about taunting and threat. For any more help and information, make sure you check out thetankclub.com or hop on over to the Tank Club Discord. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye for now.